The following video-audio presentation is presented with slides from my time as a Navy chaplain serving with the 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, 3rd Marine Division, Fleet Marine Force, Republic of South Vietnam, October 1967 to May 1968, and the 3rd Engineer Battalion, 3rd Marine Division, Fleet Marine Force, Republic of South Vietnam, June 1968 to October 1968. This DVD is being prepared and made available with the heartfelt desire that it might serve as a means to help us share with family and friends some of those times and buddies and sights and sounds, the people and the country, and some of the equipment we used. It is especially dedicated to my wife Mary, as she stayed behind and did an impossible task of caring for 4 very young daughters and a house and a car, and to all such wives and families, but also to the Marines and the Navy doctors and corpsmen who served with them, of whom 99.44% were true heroes. In these days, when some are still attempting to recover from the dishonor that was shown by so many, but especially some politicians, many educators, seemingly the majority of the members of the news media, and they have not had the courage to personally and openly apologize for their bad judgment and behavior, may we who served and you who supported us find reason and excuse to stand a little taller and salute a little crisper. These opening pictures remind us of the good people for whom we fought and bled and died. They deserved that country of peace, prosperity, and the pursuit of happiness that we wanted them to have, and our regret is that they could have had it if we had received the support we needed. Respect that is given receives respect. Permission to take this picture was requested and received. Please note the partial bar of soap wrapped in paper. We have heard stories about the value of used complimentary soap bars to those who do not have such luxuries. It meant more to this little lady than a new wardrobe. A wonderful gift, humbly received. Note the boys pictured in the window standing on top of one another to see what they also might get. A common sight when convoying through the villages, an older sibling with a child on their hip. Please note the bundles of wood stacked under the eaves. In many places, the fuel with which to heat food is more costly than the food. It is likely that these sticks were cut up roots that had been stripped from the ground during the monsoon season. At sites like this school, we held MedCap-DentCap missions in an attempt to assist the people with medical and dental needs. Our skilled and caring engineers crafted the swing set. However, before it could be delivered and set up, much discussion was held as to whether there would be a backlash if a Buddhist kid fell off it and was injured. Our Vietnamese scout convinced us that it would be received with delight and thanks. The happiness at our being there and yet the weight of concern are both evident. And so many tried to convince the world that the Vietnamese hated us. Look at the impish smiles on the faces of these young people. Their life was not easy. Please note the kids lined up behind the ambulance. After passing out cookies and wanting to be free to take a few pictures, I told the kids that the corpsmen had Kool-Aid. My popularity went up with the kids and crashed with the corpsmen. They just do not make vehicles like this anymore. Piled high with bicycles and bamboo poles and other freight, a derriere protruding from every window opening, passengers hanging on from any and every bar or frame, and it seemed that neither mud nor flood could hinder their journey, but here a flat tire did. Rice paddies and water buffaloes and boys to keep them apart. Stepping into the opening in the bamboo fence and respectfully pointing at my camera and the man, permission was received to take this picture. Note the house, the wife mother with a small child on the far right, and the young child standing in the center doorway. Without refrigeration, especially in this tropical country, the trip to the market was often made daily. With a basket on both ends of the balance pole, produce and product was both taken to and from the market. May we never complain about having to stop by the store. Imagine the dust and noise and odors. And this woman, having baby pigs to bring to market, was ingenious to prepare for each of them a chicken wire mini cage. Vin, our scout. Bragging about the sewing skills of my wife and the things she made for our 4 daughters, Vin took me into the village to buy some material. He refused repayment for it. When asked what he might like from the States, he, looking down and kicking his boots together in embarrassment, finally said, "A pair of blue jeans. However, they have to have that piece of leather on them that says Levi." When they came, along with other articles of clothing, I advised Vin that if he wanted the jeans to fit properly, he should put them on, go into the shower to get them wet, and then air dry them. His look in response was, "You must be kidding me." However, soon after, I spied Vin, jeans and wrapper, heading for the shower, and then jeans air drying on a Conware line. Shortly before Christmas, we took some goodies from home to the Roman Catholic orphanage in Way City. Note the Oriental Christmas decorations. We were welcomed with respect and received heartfelt thanks. Special use for our brass shell casings. Another orphanage, but not in a village nor town. Staff and children. As I started to hand out our goodies, some powdered milk and like things, the priest hurried over to ask if he might have them. His reasoning was that he would be able to divide them up so that each individual might receive a gift. Now, what did you get last Christmas? With their bare feet and their warmest smiles, we were offered thanks in song and dance. Their appreciation and respect and thanks were expressed in many ways. Surrounded by Vietnamese boys, prepared to share goodies, offering to teach a couple words of English, the response, "We know that English stuff. You want to learn some Vietnamese?" The brew. Being moved to refugee villages, otherwise the enemy would use them as human shields, forcing women and children at bayonet point to run in front of them, carrying all their possessions, being forced from their homes, and yet so patient and so stoic. Note the family savings account formed into silver rings and worn around the neck. The little pipe jutting from the mouth of the woman was used for smoking mild drugs for pain abatement. One of the most practical things we did was help them dig these wells in order to have clean water. Note the green number 10 tin can being used to draw the water. The community sawmill. Note the wood-wheeled cart. Refugee villages. Interesting that the huts of the civilized are built on the ground and are subject to flood and mud, but the homes of the savages are built on stilts to remain high and dry. Elephant grass. Passage through this grass would leave one with 1,000,000 razor blade-like cuts. Painful to say the least. Hills and valleys from a helicopter. Country airport. The roads formed a triangle often occupied by Vietnamese. When passing by, one would hear sounds of laughter, obviously from bantering and teasing. It sounded so unusual. It was apparent that the people rarely felt safe enough to laugh and have fun. Should a people have that right? Flying in country from Okinawa, the landing site was Dong Ha. Having heard war stories, and each young Marine knowing that he would be assigned to the battalion with the greatest number of casualties, but there was one familiar thing, hearing the gunny yell, "Marine!" And in the midst of all of this, the brave humorist painted Santa and Snoopy on the end of the mess hall. To know him is to love him. Quang Tri, the Hill of the Angels. Below Quang Tri, note the razor steel concertina wire. Command bunker Quang Tri. My third day in country, a CH-53 helicopter sat down and dropped the tailgate. Boarding with my chaplain's assistant and becoming airborne, he began to chant in my ear, "Run, Chaplain, run." When we landed on Quang Tri, everyone else ran and hunkered down behind a sandbag wall, so I did also. When a helicopter is to land, the air officer must indicate the direction of the wind by popping a smoke grenade. This often gets a response from the enemy. Mud and more mud and pray for rain. Mud absorbs shrapnel from an exploding 152 millimeter shell. One of the toughest Marines celebrated his birthday by running 15 miles in the mud. One enemy round, one piece of shrapnel followed the trench line, another tragic loss. Trail to an outpost at Sanh. On Thursday, while accompanying a resupply of water and sea rations to the hill, we heard the enemy whistling signals from the elephant grass beside the trail as they discussed the possibility of attack. Thankfully, they decided against it. Church service was offered to the men on the bald hill, and religious tracts were handed out. On Sunday, the communist Vietnamese, high on betel nut, attacked the hill. The bravery of the Marines was evident as they withstood the attackers, even to catching Chinese hand grenades and throwing them back at the enemy. The cost in casualties was high. Our lay leaders were very active, both in helping the chaplain and by holding services in his absence. Here they prepare for a service in the howitzer pit. Sure would have been great having one of these mules on the farm. Tough, practical, but no springs. The Rock Crusher. Following a worship service at the river with one platoon and catching a late supper with my staff sergeant guide and protector, while teasing one another over our involuntary jerks and ducking our heads every time one of our H&I rounds fired, it was time to have another worship service. Just as I started up the ammo box steps to an empty hooch, the enemy decided to return fire. One of their mortar rounds hit this Euclid dump truck. This position had been spared from attacks before. Everyone was quite relaxed. There were no bunkers, just slit trenches. Stepping back in order to avoid being run over by Marines, I was the recipient of some of the shrapnel from the round that hit this Navy pickup truck. After helping carry wounded to the corpsman, the XO and I continued by climbing over boulders in order to visit the bunkers of a platoon whose officer had been killed in the mortar attack. Helicopter landing, smoke grenade to assist the crew, enemy knows what's happening, heads up. Having one of the two hospital ships always close by was most meaningful when the wounded needed emergency care. Here the Sergeant Major and I visited the USS Sanctuary, attempting to determine the location and status of missing members from the battalion. My brief military career had been spent with the Marines. On the Sanctuary, everyone was dressed in spotless white uniforms. I was in my sweaty, soiled utilities with my plastic spoon and the pen holder on the pocket. The ship's chaplain made the mistake of inviting me to join him for dinner in the wardroom. Having lived where when you had an opportunity to eat while your food was hot, I immediately slurped my soup. Then I noticed that everyone else was waiting for the officer of the mess to pick up his spoon. Live in the mud, stay in the mud. CH-46 delivering resupply to troops stationed on a mountaintop outpost. On one such trip, with a little confusion between yards and meters, we almost came in too low. Note the short landing strip. The ingenuity of the United States Marine. No one brought a guitar to the hill, and no one knew how it got there, but it was there. Mountaintop worship. And always travel with the CO. He never gets left stranded. Fire in the hole. Class C unstable ammo being destroyed. Walking down the road and not being aware that it was going to happen, I thought we had been hit with a nuclear weapon. Arc light. 50 500-pound bombs per plane. The result? Took a few in our perimeter one night. The Marine Corps birthday receives the highest recognition. Here in the rain and mud, the cake waits to be cut and served by the most senior and the youngest Marine. When it became too dangerous for the resupply planes to land, airdrop was used. Because it was too risky to bring in medevac helicopters, 2 otters were dispatched to our site outside Sanh. A number 10 tin can of purple plums, couple cigars, an onion or two. Source explained by the otter drivers, when we went to pick these packages up for the colonel, they'd popped open and they hit the ground. Battalion aid station, Sanh. Here is one of the greatest heroes of the war, a young battalion medical officer. Medical facility, Camp Evans. One day it began to rain lightly, and the dentist came rushing from the dental trailer in the background, bounding down the steps. When asked why, he responded, "There are so many shrapnel holes in that trailer, when it gets wet, one is apt to get electrocuted." Sandbags filled with Gideon New Testament and Psalms books, an extra large hole in the ground for safety when having worship services, a rough cross outside as a welcoming sign, home of a lay leader. Following our 90 days at Sanh and an exchange of responsibility with another battalion while under heavy fire from the enemy, we held our memorial service for the 158 men from the battalion who had died in that battle to keep Sanh. How painful to walk the Vietnam Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C., and to pause to read the names from that campaign. A copy of the memorial service is available. Napalm. Those who have seen it understand. To those who have not, it cannot be adequately described. The Roman Catholic Cathedral in Way City. Many question the expenditures to build such a monument in the midst of so much poverty and suffering. Perhaps its greatest value is in offering the people something to cause them to look up from the labors and suffering of daily life for just a little relief and hope, and a reminder of the might and beauty of our God. Lift high the cross, see his glory, know his presence. Roman Catholic Church in the country, the interior, Village Roman Catholic Church, Buddha. When one passed across in front, the eyes seemed to follow. Upon closer inspection, one finds that they are merely indentations in the face. Your imagination gives them life. Notice the lotus flowers and the shuvan, reminding one of a reversed Nazi swastika, symbols of life and peace. A grave site. In order to hinder the escape of any evil, angry spirit that might rise from the dead and terrorize the living, a wall spans the entrance. Burial in the fetal position facilitates reincarnation. Another Buddhist cemetery monument. Outside the city wall of Way City, these little spirit houses are equipped with dining facilities where food might be placed and a place to rest. As spirits travel and become weary and irritable, here they have an opportunity to dine and refresh, that their treatment of the people who dwell here might be favorable. Spirit houses for the benefit of the inhabitants of the city of Dong Ha. Dong Ha, the chaplain's first home. Note the sandbag walls. One did not have to be concerned about the dust flying through the area, in that there were sufficient shrapnel holes in the walls to allow it to pass right through. One of the wonders of war, my predecessor had scrounged and held on to a real bed. Chaplain's home at Quang Tri. Note the ammo boxes rigged together to be used for storage. Chaplain's hooch at Camp Evans. Note the wood ammo box steps and the tank ammo box laundry sink. When the generator was running, enough power was allotted for one light bulb. In the evening it was used for illumination in the hooch. Overnight it was used in my hot box for drying my utilities. Preparation for one chaplain's assistant to leave the walking dead and another to take his place. Soon after this exchange, my new assistant was killed in an attack on our position. He had returned to his old company to tell his buddies that he was going to be leaving with me to get supplies for our ministry. Having been the colonel's driver, he was asked why he would give up that desirable position to serve with the chaplain. His reply, "With him I can learn more about God." A mighty fine home. Chapel at Dong Ha. Note the sandbag walls. Here we held worship services, and here I held orientation meetings with our new Marines. Chaplain, why are we here? Holding up a map of Asia and pointing out the two trouble spots in the world at that time, namely that little strip of land known as Palestine, Israel, and the other known as Vietnam, my reply. The enemies of democracy are attempting to use these two highways to destroy our principles and ideals and keep them from our allies. And I am proud to serve as a chaplain to the gatekeepers on this highway, the United States Marines. Chapel, Camp Evans. The colonel was happy to give us the tent that was falling down to be used for worship services, and that he knew my faithful helpers would get it squared away and it would be available for his use on Monday. 7 frames overlaid with tents were being erected. I learned about the use of 6. That left 1 available. When the colonel was asked if it could be used that Sunday, he replied that it could as long as it was available for his use on Monday. Scrounging cut off pieces of 2x4 from the mud, along with nails, and using 105mm ammo boxes, the altar was erected. Removing the lids from 105mm ammo boxes and using them for end pieces on the upturned ammo boxes, the pews were assembled. A beautiful cross that had mysteriously disappeared from the division chaplain storage room became the focal point for worship. Seeking help from the sergeant major and talking to the colonel, sure would be good for the morale of the troops to see you in church tomorrow. The colonel was there. As he stepped through the door, he beckoned me to the back of the chapel. His comment, "I can't use this now. It's a church." "Thank you, sir." Worship by the road outside Cantien. My men would crawl through incoming to be able to worship together. Christmas Day, 1968. A Marine from the 155mm guns, following a worship service I offered them, had approached and asked if I could use an organist. Another Marine offered the information that he had seen a little foot pump organ hidden away in an underground bunker. We had the organist. We needed an organ. We found an organ. We had them for our Christmas Day worship. The next day, they were both offered to the division chaplain. It was his organ anyway. The audio is completed only for the first 80 slides. Additional slides are for those who might like to look at them, find a familiar face or scene. Any questions will be considered, however, the answers cannot be guaranteed. The places and names on the audio are to the best of my knowledge and memory. Where mistakes have been made, please be kind. Just wait until you get old. In the integrity of the U.S. Marine, I respectfully request that additional copies not be made of this material. Thank you. Again, you Marines, with your doctors and corpsmen, especially as I had the privilege of serving and serving with, you are to be named among the greatest Americans. To quote a Marine, life has a special flavor for those who fought for it, that the sheltered never know. Semper Fi.